All right, that was the first bell. Good morning. Okay, this quarter we've been looking at scriptural view of different things, and today I'm going to attempt to facilitate the conversation looking at a scriptural view of trials. Everybody goes through trials at some point in their life. There is no immunity from that, and they're different for everybody, and how people react to those trials is different for everybody. So what I want to do today is I welcome your input and some dialogue as we talk about these things. I want to look at it from a scriptural view, but I also want to give you toward the end, some tips and pointers from the way that my family has dealt with the trials we've gone through. Not that we know what we're doing, we just have a little bit of experience with a whole lot of different things, health-wise and job-wise, things like that. So, y'all know our story, most of you. Like I say, nobody's immune to trials, and at some point in your life, something will happen that will test you and cause you to question things. And I think, for me, when we see people going through things, we need to be careful how we approach them and how we talk to them about those things, because that becomes on us, helping them through their trials. And maybe as we help them, we're helping ourselves as well. And there is a go-to verse for trials that everybody uses. In James 1, verses 2 and 3, it says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know the testing of your faith produces steadfastness." And that is true. It is true that trials will produce steadfastness in you. It'll produce patience. It'll produce a greater dependence on God. So why do we find it so hard to have joy in trials? Why do we find it hard to have that joy? Okay, that's right. We are blinded by the situation. We're thinking, hey, I'm the only one going through this sometimes, right? Larry, do you have something? That's right. You can't see the end from the beginning because you don't know how it's going to turn out. But it's going to turn out one way, good or bad. And usually we think it's going to be bad, and we anticipate it being bad. And that's not always the case. We struggle. I look at this verse and I think about the early Christians and the things they were going through. How could they possibly find joy in being persecuted? I mean, our trials today can be similar, but they're really not. Unless you're being persecuted for your faith, and if you're not being persecuted for your faith, maybe you need to look at yourself. Because I think sometimes we need to be persecuted for what we believe in and how we react to things. I mean, I work with this guy now that his daily task, I think, is to make fun of the rest of us in the department that are actually believers. I think he sets himself a task to see how much he can belittle us every day. I mean, he's very foul-mouthed. And we have a thing we do when we present classes and presentations. It's called a VOG for some reason, and it's called the voice of God. Because when the speaker speaks, it's like, "Hey, everybody," and it echoes around the hall. And so one day, we were up in the office, and he's standing there pretending he's the voice of God. I mean, he has a voice like Rex, that deep, you want to hear it. I mean, we've even used Rex for that at our office, at least once, right? But he does that for us, and he does these voiceovers, and he was standing there just doing it in the hallway one day, and I went, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I am God. I'm the voice of God." I went, "Stop. Just stop." And he's like, "Me doing this offends you. Of all the words I use and foul mouth I use, this offends you?" I went, "Yes, this offends me. And it's time for you to stop." But that is my trial. My trial at work, and that's how I stood up to it. And you have to decide how you're going to stand up to things. And if we look at trials, we can define them. If we look at the definition of trial, Webster uses that as a noun. It's the action or process of trying or putting to the proof. It's a try out or an experiment to test the quality or the value of something or the usefulness of something. And if we look at our trials that way, maybe that will help us. This is just testing me and proving me as to how I should be acting and reacting. If you go to Vines, he calls it having the experience of something, a rendering or refining. And the Bible talks all the time about being refined like gold. And maybe that's what we're doing as Christians. Maybe a health problem is refining you. I don't know. I don't know how God works, and I don't pretend to question how God works in trials. But we have to look at our trials as a testing of our faith, of building us up and changing us. So what are trials? What are trials for you? Anybody? Okay. There's subjection to suffering or temptation. That's true. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Okay. A test of will. Okay. That's true. It's a test of faith, a test of will, and they're different things, right? Different things for everybody. They come in all shapes and sizes. They do. And being a Christian will not insulate you from trials. However, there are some cases where people think, "Hey, I'm a Christian. Why is God allowing this to happen?" Right? And I've heard people say that, even at work. A good God would not allow his people to suffer like this. Well, yes, he will. God will allow people to suffer, and there's a reason. Trials take on many different forms. We talked earlier. It could be a job loss. It could be a chronic illness, the loss of a family member, just stress at work, persecution. Anybody here have any of these things in their life at all? Everybody, right? You've had it, maybe one of these or more of these in your life. And maybe it's just things are weighing you down, life in general. And I dare say that this last year and a half or 2 years, because of COVID, has been trying on everybody. It's been a trying 2 years now almost. We've changed things. And as Christians, we've had to change the way we worship. We didn't change the fact that we worship. We changed the way we did it. And that's a trial. And I don't dare speak for all the other elders, but for me, the decisions we had to make during all that were a trial. And it's still a trial. I still struggle with hoping and thinking and praying that we made the right decisions. Trials are varied and different. Yes, and I agree with that. Sometimes we get bogged down and it's all about me, and it's really not about me. I know from my own perspective, when something happens, or we have like another health crisis at our house, I try to determine how I react to that and how my behavior can be a blessing to somebody else. Because I don't want to get bogged down in me or the situation. I want to use it to be better. And we'll talk about that some more. We'll talk about what you pointed out with God is in control in just a few minutes. Anybody else? Trials versus temptations. Are they the same thing for you? Okay. Well, I think, as you said, I think they're very similar, but I think they're different. Um, I think, yes, ma'am. Okay.
God doesn't tempt us. He certainly sends trials.
Yeah, God does not tempt us, but He does send trials. That's true. I think our trials can become temptations, and temptations can become trials when we give in to them, like you were saying. I think trials lead us to complain and to blame. We complain about what's going on. We blame somebody else. People have been known to blame God for their trials. And they lead us away from what is most important. Randy, would you look at Hebrews chapter 12 and read verses 2 and 3 for us, please? Yes, sir.
Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down on the right hand of the God.
Okay.
For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, that you will not grow weary.
Right. I think that sometimes our trials lead us to look away from what's most important. We turn our eyes off God, we turn our eyes off Jesus, and we stop looking at that example that He gave us. He was the ultimate example of going through trials and being persecuted for who He was and what He was. This is going way faster than I intended. Yes, sir. The question was, does failing at a trial lead to sin, where failing at a temptation does lead to sin, right? I don't think failing at a trial leads to sin. I don't. Not necessarily. It can. I think I would fail at a trial if I was not focused on doing something different. Does that make sense? As at our house, we've had, as you know, a lot of medical trials. mainly involving Sandlin. Started when she was 2 with cancer, 11 with cancer. We moved here and there was a broken leg and tumors in her bones, and then her back. And, and as dad, I felt the trial as well as she did. I mean, I wasn't going through it with her. As her, I was going with her. And as the dad, I'm supposed to fix things, right? All you dads know that. As a dad, you're supposed to fix it. I couldn't fix it. So my dependence had to be on God to take us where we needed to be. And so in that trial, we prayed a lot that God would take us where we needed to be. And I firmly, firmly believe that because of God's providence, He took us to the Mayo Clinic and the doctor that fixed her. I mean, she even has a shirt that says repaired in Rochester. So I think we pray for what we need in our trials, and God's going to lead us to the answer. And I firmly believe for me, some of y'all know I had spinal tumors that I had to have taken out at the Mayo Clinic. And we did not know about them until we moved to Alabama. And I believe God brought us to Alabama to find out about that. Yes, ma'am. Good. I'm trying to digest what you just said. I think I partly disagree with you. I don't think God tempts us. God allows us to be tempted. I mean, He tells you that. He'll send you a strong delusion to allow you to believe a lie. But God is not the one doing that. God allows that. God does test us that way, I believe. Trying to decide how I want to say this. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Steve, you look like you need to say something.
So every minute of my waking day, every day, there are opportunities for me to do right, wrong, right?
Mhm.
Good, better, best that I can come up with in that moment. We talked in a Bible class here. Adam was teaching, Nancy was in class, Randy was in class, several of us were in class, and we came across some scriptures like David with the census. There's the King's rendition of that. There's the Chronicles rendition of that, and one of them says Satan, one of them says God. So where I've come to is that there is some ambiguity in some of these passages, and it's hard for me to wrap my brain around exactly the distinction and exactly what God's role is. There's pretty clear, straightforward texts like James that are just very straightforward. Mm-hmm. God does not sin. God cannot sin. It is impossible for Him to sin. He can't feel a temptation to do wicked, right? He's just so above that and apart from that that it just doesn't allure him or draw him. And related to that, he does not himself tempt us. That's what James explains. Then there's some other examples in Scripture, though, that make it like, well, he's clearly involved in some way. He's clearly allowing it to happen and maybe even orchestrating it to happen. So I don't know those, I can't parse those lines. All I know is this. Every waking day, every waking minute, I'm choosing what to do with my time. I'm seeing things, I'm thinking things. I could be sitting here looking at one of you and thinking, malicious thoughts or judgmental thoughts or thinking down about you or what. I mean, all these, moment by moment, these things are happening. So those are all opportunities to do good or to do wrong. I think what we call a temptation is when we are conscious of it.
Okay.
When we're conscious of it. And what could be a temptation for one of you may not be a temptation for me. Okay? I've used this illustration before. Drugs do not tempt me. They just don't tempt me. I have no feeling, no desire, no curiosity to take drugs. Stealing large amounts of money. I'm going to walk by the money and I'm not going to take it. Okay? But there's other types of temptations. Laziness, very tempting to me. Very tempting to me. Okay? Some of the rest of you might be the exact opposite. Like maybe money's a problem or alcohol's a problem, but you're just working all the time. You never want to sit down. Okay? My father-in-law is one of those. Okay?
I know.
Yeah.
I'm like, sit down. That's like my dad. I'm like, dude, you're 85. Sit down. All right, let's quickly, I got to move on. Here's some Old Testament biblical characters who endured trials of faith. We had Abraham. He was told to get up and go. He got up and went. Moses, he chose to suffer with God's people rather than enjoy the riches of Pharaoh's kingdom. Daniel, taken away into captivity, tested daily because he chose not to eat the foods that would make him ruddy and healthy looking. He chose to eat vegetables only and to see what would happen. He knew God would take care of him. He was thrown into a lion's den for his expression of his faith, right? There's many others. We have Joseph. Somebody brought up David a while ago. The prophets. Job. We'll get to him in just a minute. You've been reading my notes? We have Job, the prophets, Noah. I mean, he was persecuted and made fun of, right? I mean, he's in the middle of dry land. God says, build a boat. He's building a boat. And where do trials come from? Sometimes a direct command from God, right? In the case of Abraham, his trial was a direct command from God. God said, go. God said, offer up your son. And he was in the process of doing that. And God stopped him. God allowing others to try his children. In the case of Job, as David said, God offered Job up to Satan to tempt him and to put him through trials. Sometimes it's the consequences of your own beliefs, as was the case of Daniel. He believed he was supposed to pray every day, and he did it in spite of the orders of the king. So he was persecuted. He was thrown in the lion's den, and God took care of him. Then we have Jesus, the ultimate example of dealing with trials, right? He had all three of these. There was a direct command from God, go down, save these people. So he did. He was persecuted, spit on, made fun of, beaten and flogged, and finally crucified. His beliefs were he came to do the Father's will. So his persecutions were a result of his beliefs and his attitude toward God, at least in my thoughts. You may.
Joseph
And I agree with you. I do believe Satan works on us on a daily basis. Like Steve said, we have to make a choice of what we're going to do or not do, right? Okay, Keith? Right. Man gave in. Okay. So what's the purpose of trials? I think they manifest that we're God's children. If somebody would turn to Hebrews chapter 12 and read verses 6 through 13 for me. And then someone else turn to 1 Peter chapter 1 and be ready to read verses 6 through 9. And then somebody read Romans 5, 3 through 4. Okay. 13.
For those whom the Lord loves, he scourges every son he receives. It is for discipline that you endure. God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom the Father does not discipline? But if you are without discipline, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate children, not sons. Furthermore, we have earthly fathers who discipline us. We respected them. Shall we not much rather be subject to the Father's Spirit? For they disciplined us for a short time as seemed best to them, but he disciplines us for our good, so that we may share his holiness. All discipline for the moment seems not to be joyful, but sorrowful. Yet to those who have been trained by it, afterward it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. Therefore, strengthen the hands that are weak, and the knees that are feeble. Make straight paths for your feet, so that the limb which is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be.
Okay. I believe that trials manifest for God's children. And I believe as God's children, when we see somebody going through trials, it's our job and our privilege to lift them up, to help them stand up and face those things, right? I mean, like, I don't know what Matthew's going through. Just looking at him, he looks like he's normal. I don't know what he might be facing every day. I mean, he travels a lot now. He's away from his family. That could be a trial for him. I think it. Who's going to read 1 Peter? Steve? Okay.
So, can you imagine at least two different categories of reasons why a father would discipline the son? I think we can. One is, you're on the wrong path, son.
Mm-hmm.
You're choosing poorly. You're doing badly. So I'm going to use the rod, not literally a metal rod, I hope, but a implement that corrects. But then there's the other kind of discipline that we know about, especially with our fascination with sports, the Olympics, and sports of all kinds. I mean, athletes discipline themselves. It's not that they did anything wrong. It's that if I want to be at my best in this competition, I need to train my body, exert my body, and get it into a condition where it can perform at the highest level. So that's more of a proactive, get ready for some big stuff that's coming down the road, and so you train for it. And then there's other times where God might discipline us because we're all doing something wrong, and he's trying to get our attention and to wake us up and get us back on the right path. Either of those, I think, are valid and are probably happening in our lives throughout the course of life.
Right. I can agree with that. I know that my dad put me back on the straight and narrow several times growing up.
So in other words, sometimes it's preparation.
Yeah, I think there's instructive discipline and corrective discipline. I can instruct you in God's Word to show you where maybe you're veering from the path. Or as I could have corrective discipline, and because you're so far off the path, we can bring it to everybody's attention and yours. Right? Causes us to develop patience. Who's got 1 Peter? 1 Peter 1, 6 through 9.
This you greatly rejoice, even in now for a little while, when necessary, you have been distressed by various trials, so that the fruit of your faith may be more precious than gold, which is perishable, even though tested by fire, may be found to result in great and glorious honor at the revelation.
Okay. Anybody feel like they're patiently enduring their trials? No, I'm not. I'm like, let's get this over with, right? I know, and I hate to keep using my daughter as an example, but that's all I got. When Sandlin was going through the worst of chemo, people would come up to me, God's got a plan. I'm like, really? You think He'll let me in on it? I was not patient. And that was a problem. I was failing at that trial because I was not being patient and letting God work. And I don't know where I was going with that, but I wish He'd let me in on His plan so I could help. But God doesn't need my help, right? So, well, I do remember one time there was one lady that we went to church with that she was an arm patter. Every service, she'd come up, how you doing? Well, I've lost it one Sunday with her. I lost my patience. I said, are you asking because you want to know, or are you asking because you're just being nice? She goes, well, I really want to know. I said, well, here's how I'm doing. I'm angry. I don't understand, and I want to know why. And I didn't get my answer I wanted, but I know why. Because I firmly believe God had a bigger plan. Something better in mind. Yes, sir.
Here might be the perfect case study for how we observe that failing in temptation can be different than failing, air quotes, with trial. Okay? So take the story of Job.
Mm-hmm.
What do we think we know about Job? He endured terrible, horrific trials. Boom, 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 one after another.
Yep.
Most of the book is filled up with Job and his three friends, and then Elihu later, the other guy, talking to one another and thinking through it, wrestling with it, asking questions. And Job asks a lot of questions. Would we say that Job was struggling with it? Would we say that Job was, kind of complaining some in the sense that he's like, I don't understand why is this happening to me? Okay. Now, there's another statement made in Job that says throughout it all, Job did not what?
Blame.
Did not sin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's a difference between sinning in the face of a trial, like maybe Job's wife, do curse God and just die. Okay? I would say that was a faithless, wrong, sinful attitude to have. But Job wrestled with it, he struggled with it, he was angry, he questioned, okay? And my sense is, I may misunderstand the book of Job, but my sense is Job came through that trial. He pleased God through that trial. So far be it from me, Barry, to tell you that you failed at your trial. But from some of the things you said, it sounds to me like that's what going through a trial feels like. And if you're talking to God, if you're looking to God for answers, and you can ask him questions, and you can be angry, that's what some of the old prophets were doing, right? I think that Habakkuk, or some of those guys were like, why God? How long, God? So that
Felt like it though.
nature of the trial is struggling with it and wrestling with it. If it weren't hard for you, it wouldn't be a trial, right? I mean, a well-trained athlete walks up 10 flights of stairs consecutively. Doesn't even get his heart rate up. That's not a trial for him. The same 10 flights of stairs, I'm huffing and puffing, stopping 3 times.
I'm huffing and puffing after the third step, but but you know, it felt like a failure to me at the time, and sometimes still today it does. I guess I just need to move on. But trials help us prove ourselves. Somebody read Romans 5:3-4, Matt. 5:3-4.
Not only that, but we also glory in tribulation, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, perseverance, character.
Okay. Trials prove us, right? We prove ourselves. We prove to ourselves we can face things. All right. Then we have another go-to verse. If I'm pressing it correctly. Proverbs 3:5-8. This is my wife's very favorite Bible verse ever. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. He'll be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. When we're going through trials, I'm afraid sometimes we lose our focus. We need to trust in the Lord with all of our heart. I can't fix things. I don't understand why things are happening to me, to other people. But it's really not mine to question. So I have to trust that God's going to take care of it. He's going to lead me where I need to be, take me where I need to go. So, all right. I told you at the beginning I would give you some pointers and tips that have worked for me. I need to remember that God is God and I am not. God is the creator. I am the created. There is a total dependency on God through trials because he made me. I didn't make myself. He knows what's best. God's thoughts are higher than my thoughts. God's ways are higher than my ways. And Isaiah 55:8-9, if somebody would read that for me. God knows. He knows what's best. He knows what he has planned for us. He has his thoughts, and I can't even fathom those sometimes. I don't know the plan God has for me, but it's better than anything I could plan for myself. And maybe God's plan is for me to have trials and tribulations and suffering. Maybe Barry needs that. And as we talked earlier, maybe he's disciplining me. Maybe he's disciplining you for whatever you're going through. But his plan is better than anything we could come up with. I think we have to be careful we don't treat God as our own personal genie. I think sometimes we go through trials and we just, hey, God's going to fix that. Well, maybe God's going to let you endure it for a while. I know in my life, I've heard people express things, they're just going to pray it away. Well, you can pray things away. But God's not your personal genie. He's not there to grant your 3 wishes. He's there to help you get through whatever it is you're facing. We have to learn to trust God. Sometimes we don't trust enough. I think that some cases, instead of trusting God to take care of things, we just expect him to. And I think that comes from thinking he's our own personal genie. You just expect him to fix it. Well, I think you have to do your part too, and trust in him and understand what it is he's doing. Okay? Through all the stuff that's ever happened at our house, the medical trials, job loss, a stroke on me, we've taken this attitude, it is what it is, and we'll deal with it. Because when a crisis strikes, there's no wishing it away. You have to deal with it. You have to work through it. You have to do what you have to do. You know, Paul had to deal with his thorn in the flesh. Somebody turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and read verses 7 through 10 for me. Maybe we should be like Paul and consider our trials. Maybe your trials are your thorn in the flesh. Maybe they're being given to you to make you stronger and help you deal with things a little more. You have to face reality. Things are real. What's real in your life is what's important to you. And I do know, here's an example again of things that happened for me. I've talked to other people about things they're going through, and they're like, oh, this is nothing compared to what you're going through. Well, it is for you, right? That's your reality. Your trials are your trials, and they're just as real and just as big to you. And as a fellow Christian, it's my job to help you get through that. I firmly believe, and I say all the time, that we were all put on this planet to be a blessing to somebody else and to lift somebody else up and do something for somebody else. You know, there is no easy button in life. It's not just going to happen for you. You have to put some effort into it. So, right. Yeah, we get a temptation of why me instead of why not me, right? This verse, again, reminds me of my daughter because I walked into her room at her house and she has a whiteboard in there, and this was written on her whiteboard. During the time when she had all of her leg surgeries and she wasn't able to walk, and this was on the whiteboard. I walked in and went, what am I complaining about? And this is on Sandlin's license plate. It's with her every day. Romans 8. Okay, 5 minutes, he says. Romans 8:18. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed. We have to set our sights on something bigger and higher than any of us would ever have. All right, here's my last round of tips and things for you. You can either be bitter about your trials or you can be better. You have to make the choice. As you were saying, Steve, every day we're choosing between one thing or the other. I have to choose how I'm going to react to things that are happening to me. Because a bitter heart is going to blame God for his problems. A better heart will get out of its own personal crisis and do something for somebody else. Can we be a blessing to other people? All right, I have two final quotes for you. This is my favorite quote. I don't even know who said it, but I read it one day and it stuck with me. Things work out best for those who make the best of the way things work out. So whatever happens to me, I have to make the best of what happens and use it somehow. And this is one of Sarah's favorite quotes. It was by Martha Washington. She said, "I'm still determined to be cheerful and happy in whatever situation I may be. For I have learned from experience that the greater part of our happiness or misery depends upon our dispositions and not our circumstances." I can relate to that. And I think about Paul saying godliness with contentment is great gain. I think about a definition I heard of contentment in that case. It's maintaining my spiritual equilibrium in spite of my circumstances. And this quote makes me think of that as well. All right. That's all I have for you for our trial study. Anybody have anything they would like to add or anything else? All right. Thank you for your input and your kind attention. I hope it's been helpful. I know it helped me to study it again. So, all right. Thank you.